Hi, I'm Tony, and today we're going to be working on block number 4 for the Pixelated Halloween Quilt Along, the full moon. I love this block. It is so easy, quick, and yeah, so let's get started and sew together the full moon. This is our 4th block. So that means we have a lot of the things that we've gone over in the first couple of blocks that I'm going to be skimming a little bit. If this is a little bit more, if you want a little bit more instruction on some of the techniques or things like that, take a look at my other tutorials or the first block that we had in this series. But we're basically just going to skip through a lot of the things. I am going to mention the things. I'm going to skim them and take a look at them. All right, so fabrics. So we are making this as a standalone. We're making it as part of the quilt along, so we don't have to worry about pulling that fabric. We need light blue, light yellow, dark blue, and light gray. So I've already pulled those fabrics, and we've got those. And then let's see, 1.5 to I don't have any pieces to pull from previous blocks. No, I don't. I do not have to worry about this right here because we do not have to pull previous pieces from previous blocks. So it's basically just starting it over. All right, well, let's get cutting then. All right, so we need our strips. So let's start at the top and work our way down. So we need our light blue. All right, so let's cut our fabrics. So light blue, we're going to need a 2.5 inch strip and a 1.5. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a look at the chart and I'm looking to see how many strips I need to cut of each one. We do have our 2.5s and our 1.5 inch strips. Now we've got our fabrics cut. We need to take our 1.5 inch strips. So we're going to cut one light blue in half. Oops, look at that. I accidentally cut this wrong. Let me fix this really quickly. Let's see, 1.5. Oh yeah, I cut that as a 2. There we are. All right, so we're going to take this 1.5 blue and we're going to cut this in half. And so we're taking a light blue strip, cutting that in half. Light yellow, cutting it in half. Now, you notice how I'm cutting it in half this way? This is how we do those. We don't want to cut it in half this way because I would just tell you to cut those strips a different size. So we're taking it and we're opening it up, and then the last one is one dark blue. So we're taking our dark blue and then cutting in half. So now you have 2 half pieces that are at least 20 inches in length instead of the at least 40 inches in length. And then we're going to take the other 2. We're going to take all of those 1.5 inch strips, set them aside. Now let's take a look at our 2.5 inch strips. We're going to go ahead and cut our pieces from those. Now, I'm really excited because this is the first stream that I have with my new iron. I'm going to be talking about this new iron a bit tomorrow on my Twitch stream, but this is the brand new Oliso. It is the TG 1600 Pro. So there's a couple of things that I like about this iron. It is, obviously it's an Oliso, it's a touch, it's a really great iron, but they specifically said that it's got a filtration system, so you can use tap water if you want. You don't have to worry about all the buildup of the gunk. It also has a ceramic sole plate and a bunch of other things that are added to it to make it a lot easier. So I'm really excited. I have not used, this is the very first time using it, so if I have any issues, we will see. We will see. All right, so it's taking our light blue and, ooh, yeah, that's nice. Now I've got my steam all the way up and the heat all the way up. Oh yeah, that's really nice. And then ironing this. Now you notice how when I iron my strips, and I talked about this on the first block, I make sure that I keep it folded in half because as I cut my pieces, I'm going to cut them 2 pieces at a time. If the pieces that I cut 2 at a time, if I don't need that piece for this block, well, then I'm going to set it aside for future blocks. Alright, so we're taking a look at the very first one. Now, from the light blue, I only need 2 2.5 by 1.5 inch rectangles. So all I'm going to do is just square this up. Now I'm using my Stripology ruler, so I want to cut at the 0 to square this up, and then 1.5. And I'm done with the light blue. And I can set that aside, and those are my pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to cut all of the pieces. Now you'll notice when I get to the dark blue, I will actually stack one on top of the other. So I'm cutting 4 pieces at a time. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through everything. I'm going to cut the rest of these pieces, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. Page 1 is done. All right, page number 2. Using the 1.5 inch strips. Sew the right sides together for each of the following combinations. A half, so these are my fulls, these are my halves. A half light blue strip. Okay. So a half light blue strip to a half dark blue strip. Now, the reason why in the pattern you'll see me doing halves like this means that this is the only block that these appear, or if it appears in subsequent blocks, it's a very small amount. So we don't need the full strips. We don't have to use that fabric, hence the half strips. All right, so we've got the light blue to dark blue. We need a light yellow. Okay, light yellow to a half dark blue. Okay, and then 1 dark blue to 1 light gray. So these 2 here are yellow and our light blue half strips. We're just going to take these, set these aside with the other pieces for future blocks. All right, so let's go ahead and sew these together. I will show on camera what I'm doing, but I'm going to speed it up. I'm just basically doing strip piecing where, yes, so I'm doing strip piecing where I'm just sewing the 2 together super fast. I do have a video on strip piecing if you want to take a look at it below if you need more information on it. Alright, so we're going to cut each of these newly combined strips in half. Same thing as we did before whenever we did those half pieces. Now, we do have a full strip right here, and with a full strip, we're just going to take that, fold that in half. Now, when you're folding it in half, you want to try to line up those salvages as best as you can, and then you get the most out of your combined strips. Now, just because this is a shorter, you still want to do these in half. Now, with this one, you want to take the edge of the selvage to the edge of the cut part. So you see there? So there's my end of my selvage at the blue, right at that cut area there. And that's going to give me the maximum amount of space possible. I think this is, if I remember correctly, I think this is the first block that we've been using half strips. And same thing with this one. You see how much, you see where I cut that? Just like that. All right, and then now we're going to iron our strips in opposite directions. So we're going to take the light blue and blue first. Now, let me show you what we're doing and how we're doing it. So we're going to take our blue, our dark blue and our light blue. You always, let me go ahead and turn that steam back on. You always want to iron your strip first, and that locks in your seams, and you actually get a better, straighter seam by doing that. And then I always come down just once or twice just to make sure that that seam is in place. and then sew it. And that was sew, I'm sorry, iron it. And that prevents stretching your fabric out and making it all warpy and wibbly wobbly. There we are. Now, if you use a tailor's chalk, at this point you would put it on to lock those seams in. Same thing with this one. There we are. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish ironing these, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to cut them. So now let's cut. The first one, our blue and our dark blue. Whenever you iron your strips, you're ironing them in opposite directions. So you've got this one that you've ironed towards the dark blue, and this one you've ironed towards the light blue. So all I'm going to do is take this one, flip it up over this one right here, as you see in the picture. And then I'm lining this up. So I'm using my fingers to feel, to make sure that this is perfectly lined up, and it's what's called nesting the seams, and it's going to allow us to cut multiple pieces and have them be perfectly straight. So I need 6 sets of 1.5. Okay, so we're gonna trim off our 0, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and this, I believe, still has enough space for a 1.5. Yes. Now, if you have enough left over, great, set it aside. If you don't, go ahead and pitch it. It's fine. And then now, as I open up my pieces, I'm going to open them up and set them into 2 separate piles. And what this does is it separates it by the way that the seam is pointing. So in this pile, everything's going towards the light blue. In this pile, everything's going towards the dark blue. And it allows me to, whenever I'm laying them all out, it allows me to grab them a little bit easier. All right, so same thing with the yellow and the dark blue. So we're going to lay this out, and I'm only cutting 2 sets. So we've got 1, 2. Now with the rest of this, we're just going to take this and set this aside for future blocks. And the same thing, I'm opening this up into 2 separate piles. Then last but not least, our light gray and our blue. So we're laying this out, and then I need 3 and 4. 3 sets of the 2.5 and 4 sets of the 1.5. I'm just making sure. There we are. All right, so there is 1, 2, 3, and then 4 sets of the 1.5. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Great. Now, whenever I lay these out, I like to start with our 2.5s. And then, but if I need to store them for a little bit before I'm ready to lay all my pieces out, I just take the 1.5s and put them right on top. Because then they're separated by the way that the fabric points. And then this is extra. And that's it. We can actually take our rotary cutter, set it aside. I can take my straight edges, my rulers, set those aside. And now it's time to lay out the pieces. So I'm going to take my layout. Now remember, we want to keep an eye on which way these arrows point. Please read these directions if you have not already done one of these blocks. The arrow is the way that the seam points. Now we do have, if you want to skip ahead to the 3rd page, we do have a horizontal piece. So we have a gray and a yellow. Now with the horizontal pieces, in fact, let me go ahead and just start laying these out. I can go ahead and lay these pieces out just like this. There we go. And there. I'm just going to lay, and so what this does, it allows me to be more successful when I'm laying my pieces out over here, because I can literally just come over here and grab them. Now, this step number 5, this yellow and light gray, the reason why you're sewing this together right now, you're combining it now as a horizontal piece, is because this is the only place in this entire quilt that these two are sewn together. And that's why we're not sewing the strips together, because it saves us fabric and it's more efficient to just do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to sew it, iron it, set it aside. So I'm actually ignoring my own instructions and skipping to 5, and then I'll come back to number 4. Okay, so let's line this up. So what I'm going to be doing is taking a piece of paper, and I'm going to start at the very bottom, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm just going to work up one at a time. So I'm going to just put this over here. So this is going to be the blue. I'm going to put it right here so you can see it, and then I'm going to move it down, and then a light blue and blue. And then, yeah, this blue right here, you see I've got a little bit of that selvage in there. It's under a 1/4 inch. It's fine. It's fine. Totally fine. Not an issue at all. So all I'm doing is reaching over, grabbing those pieces, and laying them out so that I can see how everything is. Just like that. And then row number 8. Now, row number 8 has got a seam arrow thing. You'll see what I mean. So where you have to alternate the seams in order to get them to line up to nest, which is coming up. I thought I grabbed 2 pieces. That's just the one. And then here is that one. So the gray and the blues. Now make sure for these grays and these blues, you grab one of each in opposite directions. Notice how this one's pointing towards the blue, this one's pointing towards the gray. So make sure you have them in opposite directions. And what that will do is it will nest. So whenever we pin them, we're going to butt that right on up against each other. And then when that happens, we get a perfect point every time. So make sure that you have those alternating seams. And that is why we iron our seams to one side versus ironing them open or ironing it to the dark side, which is what a lot of the tutorials state. All right, so at this point, I'm going to keep on laying my pieces out. I'm going to speed up the video. When I get, do I have any that make a difference the way that I lay it out? No. I do not have any that have to point to the left or right. All right, so these arrows over on the far right-hand side, at this point, these arrows don't matter. You just got to worry about nesting those seams. So, all right, at this point, I'm going to start with row number 7, speed up the video. When I've got them all laid out, I'll come back and we'll take a look at how to get these pinned together for sewing. We have all of our pieces laid out. So now you should have these 2 left over. It is perfectly okay to have these 2 pieces left over. You're supposed to. Take these pieces, set them aside for future blocks. Now let's pin these. I'm going to skip up to this 3rd row. So this is row number 7. I'm going to skip to row number 7 just because I want to make sure that I can show you everything here on the camera. I'm going to start 7 and move up and then come back and do 8 and 9. Now with 7, row number 7, this is where we pay attention to these arrows. This arrow goes to the right-hand side. So we want to make sure that when we're ironing our seams this way. So you can iron them to the right. Now you can either pick up, sew, iron, and make sure the whole thing goes to the right, or the way that I do it that's efficient is I take my right piece, I flip it over my left piece, and I pin it into place. Because then what that does is as soon as I sew this, I can just take this right from my sewing machine over to the ironing board, iron it, and if I iron it like this, then my seam is going to be pointing that way, to the right. So that is all I am doing. In fact, I'm going to move this over here out of the way. So I'm going to go right over left and pin it into place. So the easy way that I remember it is that if the arrow points to the right, you want to pick up that right piece. Flip it over that left and pin that into place. Just like that. Right over left. Right over left and pin that into place. And then I've got one more, and then we'll move on to row number 6. So right over left, pinning it into place. Now, row number 6, if you take a look at that arrow, the arrow points to the left-hand side. So I'm going to be picking up the left piece, taking the left piece, flipping it up over the right piece, and pinning that into place. So that whenever I finish sewing it and taking it to the ironing board, I'm going to be ironing it this way. So I always iron that top piece. Now, again, if you're new to quilting or new to pixel quilting, this may be a little bit too complicated for right now. But I promise, one day, you'll be like, oh, this is great. This saves me so much time. It's so efficient. But you've got to get to that point. You've got to understand, you know, pixel quilting and what you're doing before you get there. So for the advanced people, this is a great time saver. All right, left over right and pinning it into place. Now, if you have a leftover piece, both of these rows are odd. So they've got an odd number of pieces. If you have a they have an even number of pieces. Words. Man, words are hard. If you have an even number of pieces, it's going to turn out even. If you have an odd number, you're going to have a single piece that's left over. That is perfectly okay. You can have that leftover piece. If you do, just set it aside by itself. And we're going to include that in the next time that we do our pinning. All right, so at this point, I'm going to speed the video up. I'm going to finish pinning all of this, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to sew it. Let's sew our rows. So all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be turning around back here. You see my rows are laid out. I'm going to be grabbing the bottom row. So this row right here is row number 9. And we're going to be sewing these using a scant 1/4 inch and using chain piecing methods. I have a video all on scant 1/4 inches and a video all on chain piecing you can find down below in the comments. All right, so let's take a look at this. So all I'm going to be doing is sewing, there we are, and just sewing them along. Now, after I finish sewing a row, I'm going to grab the next row to get it started. Just like this, I'm grabbing this around, and I'm sewing my first piece. That way I'm not putting my scrap back into my machine on a regular basis, and then I'm trimming this. Sometimes I will forget, oh, new gypsy quilter chain piece separator thing. Sometimes I'll forget and I just keep on going, and then you have to find the end and figure out where you ended up, and I'm just like, yeah, that's not a good thing. I probably just need to just take off that first one and do it just like I just showed you. So it's one of the things, again, where I'm on autopilot and I don't think about it. You've got to do it. Now, after I finish sewing an entire row, I'm just going to turn this back around and set it down on the cutting mat behind me, and then keep on going. So I'm going to speed up the video. All I'm doing is taking it from behind me, spinning it around, sewing it, separating it, spinning it right back around, and putting it back on the mat. When I'm done sewing all these, I'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to iron them. Alright, so we have sewn all of our rows, so let's iron them. So I'm going to start with row number 9. Remember, this is how I pinned it. I put it right into the sewing machine to sew it. So we're just going to lay it out just like this and then iron it. Just like that. And then ironing it up. And what that's doing, row number 9, the arrows point to the right. So by doing this, I'm making sure that those arrows are pointing to the right. Just like this. Now, if your ironing board is not on top of your cutting mat, at this point you can take your pieces and you can lay them out to make sure that everything is nice. I am not. I'm just going to take these and set them over off to the side again, because after I finish ironing this, at that point I'm going to put the iron away, and then I'll show you. We're going to lay the pieces out, make sure that they're correct, and then pin them again. So remember, whenever you're ironing these pieces, I forgot to mention it when I just automatically did it, you want to lock those seams in. Locking the seams in makes sure that it's going to be straighter and nicer and just overall better. Because better is better. Alright, so I'm going to fast forward the video. We're going to go ahead and just iron all these pieces. Then I'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to lay out and pin the next pass. All my rows are ironed. So now we're going to lay them out for our second pass. Now I forgot to mention, I call them passes every time you go through and you pin, sew, and iron a set of rows. I call that a pass. So this is row number 9. I made sure that my seams, when I laid it down, are pointing to the right, because row number 9 has the arrow to the right hand side. So I'm just going to take these and I'm going to lay them out, and I'm double checking. Oh, that's not right. Because I'm double checking on the order just to make sure that it's in the correct order. Okay, so I've got, it goes this way. There we go. There, 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 there. So I've got all of my pieces laid out. I'm making sure that I've got them on. In fact, let me move them over just a little bit more so you can see them. Now, I have 5 pieces. Remember how I said if you have an odd piece, just leave it there? And that's for this reason. So we want to make sure that we include this piece this time, just to make it more efficient. So I'm actually going to take this first piece and I'm going to set this aside down here and then pin these remaining 4. So in this case, the row number 9 goes to the right. So I'm going right over left and pinning it into place. So we're doing that and pinning that right into place. So right over left and pinning that into place. And that is it. And then row number 8, everything is going to the left. The arrow is pointing that way. So our seams are pointing to the left. So now, let's see, it goes there, there, and then here, here, there, and there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have an even number of pieces. I don't have to remove anything. So this is just a left over right and pinning it into place. Now at this point, I'm going to speed up the video. I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning these. Then I'm going to go ahead and sew them and iron them. You don't need me to show you how to sew and iron them anymore. I've already shown you. It's fine. So I'm going to speed up the video. I'm still going to show it in high speed mode. And then once we do that, once I finish ironing these, I will come back and I will show you how to pin the next pass. Now we've got all of our fabric laid out, pinned, sewn, and ironed. Now it's time for what I call the last pass. So this is row number 9. We're going to make sure that our seams are going the correct direction and then laying it out. Whoa, hold on, that's not right. There we are. It goes like this. See, look, I had it in there wrong. So there is our row number 9. We have 3 pieces left. So what I'm going to do is be efficient. I'm going to take my left piece and flip it over and pin it. And then I'm going to take my right piece and flip it over and pin it. So just like this, flip that over and pin it. And then this is our row number 9, ready to go. Now, what I'm going to do is when I sew this, I'm actually going to sew this at the same time as row number 8. So let me go ahead and let's see to the left. So there's that one, and that one, and that one, making sure it's all correct. So see how I'm taking the left over right. I may not sew at the same time. That's fine. Now, whenever you're sewing these, make sure you sew the one side and then flip it around and sew the other side. So I probably won't be sewing them in groups just because I've got to make sure that I sew them all. So at this point, this is all I'm doing is literally laying it out the correct way and then pinning it so it looks like this. So I've got each of the pieces together and it makes it just a little bit more efficient. It's just a little bit better. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. And it makes it a lot more faster. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning this. And then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. And I'm going to sew it. And then I'll come back and I'll iron it. Now when you're ironing it, make sure that you're ironing it in the correct direction. Okay? So make sure that you iron it correctly. If you don't, well then your seams are going to be all wonky. You don't want wonky seams. You want to make sure you're ironing it right. And then after I iron them, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about assembling the rows. We are almost done assembling. Yeah, I'm very excited. Assembling all of the rows. And there are our rows. All right, so we've got our rows together for the full moon. So now let's assemble our blocks. So here is row number 8. How we're going to assemble the rows. How we're going to assemble is we're going to take row number 9 and flip it up over row number 8. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the first place that I have 2 seams that intersect, which is right here. And I'm going to make sure that those seams intersect together. Before I put the pin in there, let me show you. I am nesting those seams again. So you see the seam right here? How it just nests up just like that? As soon as you get a nice fit, it's not too tight, not too loose, it's right up against each other. Go ahead and put a pin in that. And then work your way down looking for all the places that your seams intersect. So here, the next one right next to it. So there we are. And then, is that a place? Yes. Okay, so I've got to actually move it a little bit. Now in this case, I had to actually move my top over to nest in with my bottom. As you see here, the bottom is actually a little loose. My bottom row has more fabric in it than my top row. That's just because I may not have had the greatest success with my seams down here. So it's not a problem when that happens. Just keep going. So we're going to go ahead and finish. There we go. Here's in the next one. I'm going to show you how to take care of this in a minute. we're going to do what's called easing the seams. Okay, but all you're doing at first is making sure all of those seams that line up have got pins in there. Okay, so that's what we've got right now. Now, we're going to go back and take care of those other ones. So we're going to put one right here. So we want to make sure that I put pins in there. So you see here on the bottom, I have a seam and the top I don't. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to put a seam in that, just like it is. A seam in that. A pin. Words. Come on, Tony, words. So I put a pin in there, and then I'm going to go back and put a pin in the very front. And then now for easing of the seams right here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up the best I can. I'm going to kind of pull this a little bit, and then I'm going to put a pin in the middle. So I'm putting a pin right here in this middle after I'm stretching this out a bit. And you see what's happened is that bulk of fabric has now been split on either side of that pin. So now I'm going to do the same thing. If you don't do this, you may have a bunching of fabric as you put it into your sewing machine. So I'm going to do the same thing over here, where I put a pin in this side, and then stretch this out and put a pin in this side. Now on the right hand side, there's no seam there, so you don't have to have a pin in this part right here unless you need to ease that seam. But see what's happened to that seam now? See how nice and flat that is? So that is easing the seam. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to find whether the seam is on the top or the bottom. I'm going to find those seams that are by themselves and put pins in there. There's nothing there and there's nothing here. So I can put one here on the end. And that is my row 8 and 9. So at this point, that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to flip that bottom over the top and I'm going to find those seams. Wow, this one's not all the way until right here. But it's important that you find the seams that match up and do that first before going back and doing any other seams. Just because you want to make sure that those have perfect points and that they line up. So at this point, I'm going to go through, I'm going to pin all my rows, and then I'm going to sew the rows, iron the rows. Now, when you iron your rows, it doesn't make a difference which way you iron your seams. They can go up, they can go down, they can go open. Doesn't make a difference. So I'm going to then iron my rows, and I'm going to keep on going until the entire thing is done, and then I'll come back for our block reveal. And that is our full moon. That went together so quickly and so nicely. I love it. I love it so much. Hopefully you learned how to do a full moon block today. Don't forget to like this video, follow my YouTube, as well as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, my Quite Nerdy Quilters Facebook group, Pinterest, I do sometimes, TikTok, I do sometimes, Twitch, where I stream live, and I also stream live here on YouTube. Take a look at my social media. On Mondays, I post my schedules of when I'm going to be live during that week and doing things like this live. So thank you.